Hey guys, today we bring you an impressive story that will move you. Imagine going through a near-death experience, visiting hell, encountering God, and coming back with a powerful message about the future of our planet. That's exactly what happened to Callista Winslow, and what she has to reveal about November 2024 will leave your jaw dropping. Before we start, let us know in the comments which city you're watching us in, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any incredible stories like this. Now, let's get to the story. My name is Callista Winslow. At 36, life seemed like an endless cycle of loss and failure. Charleston, with its cobblestone streets and historic homes, should be a charming place to live. But to me, it was just a backdrop to an unbearable emptiness. The mornings were a struggle, the nights an abyss. My son Elliot, just 7 years old, and was the only reason I still got out of bed. That particular night, everything felt heavier. It was the 2-year anniversary of my divorce. 2 years since the man who promised to be by my side left me with a pile of debt and a broken heart. Elliot slept in the next room, the sound of his soft breathing reminding me of the weight of responsibility I carried alone. The rent was late, the bills were piling up, and the phone was ringing incessantly with demands. I sat on the couch, facing the coffee table, where an old photo of the three of us rested. My eyes filled with tears. Why me? Why does everything have to be so difficult? I murmured into the silence. My prayers had become cries for help, but it seemed like no one was listening. Even in the moments when I knelt and asked God for help, the silence was deafening. I began to believe that he had abandoned me. I picked up the phone and called my mother. "I need to talk to someone," I said, trying to hide the tears in my voice. "Callista, you are strong. It will get through this," she replied, but her voice sounded distant, almost mechanical. After hanging up, the feeling of loneliness was even deeper. That night, as Elliot slept, I made a decision. I looked at the small stack of pills in the bathroom drawer. Each one of them seemed like an outlet for the weight that crushed me. "I'm so sorry, Elliot," I whispered as I swallowed them one by one, my vision becoming blurry. Before I lost consciousness, I looked at the door to his room, whispering one last prayer. "God, if you are there, take care of him." Everything went dark. When my consciousness returned, I was no longer in my living room. Around me, everything pulsed as if it were alive, but in a grotesque way. The air was heavy and fetid, permeated with sulfur. The red light that illuminated the room came from a distant fire, and the heat was suffocating. The place looked like an endless cave, with walls that seemed to be made of living flesh. I staggered to my feet, trying to understand where I was. Screams echoed in the distance, screams of pain, despair, and suffering. I looked at the ground and saw deep claw marks, as if huge creatures had passed through there. A chill ran down my spine, despite the suffocating heat. "Callista Winslow," a guttural, ominous voice echoed behind me. I slowly turned around and saw a hideous creature. Its eyes glowed bright red, and its skin looked like it was made of cracked stone, with lava oozing out of the cracks. Beside him, other creatures, smaller but equally frightening, surrounded me. I was paralyzed, unable to scream or run. They pulled me up effortlessly, their claws piercing my skin, even though I felt no pain, just a deep, unbearable terror. I was thrown into an iron cage that was hot to the touch. From inside, I could observe other souls being tortured, chains wrapped around their bodies as they were dragged into fiery furnaces. Some begged for mercy, others screamed for help, but none seemed to be heard. As I watched, I heard heavy footsteps. The ground shook with each movement. I looked up and saw the most immense and terrifying creature I could imagine. It was a shadowy figure, with wings that seemed to be made of smoke and eyes that seemed to pierce my soul. I didn't need to ask who it was. I knew. It was Satan. He approached, his overwhelming presence making me back against the cage bars. His voice sounded like thunder. "Do you think you are here by chance, Callista? You all choose this place." His words were like blades cutting through my mind. "You lived without faith, drowning in selfishness and despair. Like half the souls on earth, you chose darkness." "No, that's not true," I finally managed to scream, my hands gripping the bars of the cage. But he laughed, a deep, deafening sound. "You have abandoned God, just like everyone else here." Suddenly, the little creatures opened the cage and started dragging me. I screamed, I fought, but it was useless. I saw a furnace in the distance, the heat rising as they took me closer to it. Despair grew inside me. Please, someone help me. God, if you exist, help me. It was at that moment that something changed. The heat began to dissipate, and an intense light pierced the darkness. The creatures screamed and backed away, letting go of my hands. The light grew brighter, until a powerful hand grabbed me, pulling me out of that terrible place. When the hand pulled me out, I felt like the entire weight of the world was being ripped away from me. The light around me was so bright that I could barely open my eyes, but at the same time it didn't hurt. On the contrary, there was a comforting warmth that took away the terror of the hell I had just experienced. When I opened my eyes with difficulty, I realized that I was no longer in the dark cave. Instead, he was in a vast, illuminated space, with no walls, just light. Suddenly, I was overcome by a feeling of unconditional love. It wasn't just something I felt, it was something that enveloped me. My legs gave way and I fell to my knees, sobbing, "Thank you, thank you." I repeated it over and over, without even knowing exactly who I was speaking to. Something inside me knew that presence was divine. Callista Winslow. The voice was calm and at the same time incredibly powerful, like soft thunder. I looked up and saw a figure before me. He didn't have a defined face, but he was an unmistakable presence. It was God. I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that it was him. An indescribable love emanated from that figure, filling every part of my being. I don't deserve to be here," I managed to say between sobs. "I failed. I couldn't be a good mother. I couldn't deal with life, and I gave up." God approached, and his voice, although firm, was full of compassion. "You feel like you failed, Callista, but what you don't understand is that all human beings face challenges. What matters is not the mistake, but what you choose to do with it." But, hell, I was there. It was horrible. "Why did the Lord let me go through that?" I asked, still shaking at the memory of the creatures and the suffering I witnessed. God calmly responded, "Hell exists, but not as eternal punishment. It is a reflection of the choices people make and the turning away from the light. You have seen hell to understand the depth of what is at stake, but you also called out to me, and that's why I'm here." I didn't know the Lord was listening to me," I confessed. "I prayed so many times, but the Lord never seemed to answer." He bowed slightly and his voice became even closer. "I always listen, always, but sometimes silence is necessary for you to find strength within yourself." My tears increased, but this time they were of relief. "I promise I will do better. I will be better. For my life, for my son." God smiled, not with a face, but with a sensation that filled the space around me. "You will have another chance, Callista. But before you go back, there is something you need to know." The light around me became more intense, almost as if the entire universe was focused on that moment. God stood before me, and the serenity in his presence contrasted with the intensity of the words he began to speak. "Callista, you will face challenges in your life, but you will need faith and courage for what is to come. November 2024 will bring significant change to the world, on both the physical and spiritual planes." My hands were shaking. "What will happen, Lord?" I asked, my voice fragile but filled with curiosity and fear. God responded with impressive calm. "These will be difficult times. The earth will undergo a necessary transformation. There will be conflicts, disasters, and challenges, but all of this will culminate in renewal. A spiritual awakening will occur, and those who are connected to love and light will play essential roles in helping others." My mind began to swirl with thoughts. But how can I, someone so broken, help others? I could barely take care of myself. God responded with infinite patience. "You saw hell, but you also felt my love. Use this experience to inspire and empower others. Every soul has a role to play, and yours is to share this message. Teach people that even in the darkest times, there is light." The feeling of responsibility began to weigh on me, but mixed in with it was something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. "I don't know if I can," I admitted in a whisper. "You will make it, because you will not be alone. I will be with you," said God, his voice resonating with the truest promise I had ever heard. God continued, his voice now filled with a warning tone. "There are many forces working to keep the world in darkness. Many will not believe you or the message you share, but even if it's difficult, trust my plan. November 2024 will be the start of something big, a renewal. After difficult times, peace will reign." I remembered Elliot and how he depended on me. "And my son, will he be safe? Take care of Elliot. Teach him to love, to be fair, to be resilient. He is part of this new generation that will help build a brighter future. I tried to absorb it all, but my mind seemed to be racing. What if I fail again? God responded with something that changed my perspective forever. You may fall, but you can always get up. Every fall is an opportunity to grow. Strength is not in perfection, but in the ability to continue. Before I could say anything else, I felt the light around me begin to soften. God, however, did not disappear. His presence remained as he spoke the final words. Live with purpose, Callista, love, forgive, prepare yourself and help others prepare. Change is coming. After God's words, I felt a change in the environment around me. The intense light that surrounded me softened, revealing a vast and majestic place. Endless shelves rose as far as the eye could see, made of a material that seemed to shine like liquid gold. Every shelf was filled with books of all colors and sizes, radiating an indescribable energy. It was a library, but not like any other I had ever seen. This place, I whispered, unable to contain my amazement. God's voice resounded again, calm and assured. This is the heavenly library. Here, each book represents the life of a soul. It contains your ups and downs, your choices, your learnings. Everything is recorded, not for judgment but for understanding. I felt a mixture of reverence and curiosity. I walked slowly between the shelves, touching one of the books. The moment I touched it, images began to fill my mind, as if I were watching a movie. It was the life of a woman who had faced extraordinary challenges. She was a single mother, like me, struggling against overwhelming odds. Her story showed her moments of despair, but also her resilience in seeking a new life for herself and her children. I felt your pain and your courage as if they were my own. In the end, I saw how her choices led her to a place of peace and happiness. It was inspiring. This woman, she managed to overcome all of this, I murmured, as tears streamed down my face. God responded, just like her, so can you. Each life is a testimony that suffering can be transformed into strength. I continued walking and chose another book. This one was different. The story showed a young man whose childhood had been marked by abuse and neglect. He grew up believing he was unlovable, isolating himself from everyone around him. His suffering was unbearable, and he ended up taking his own life. What I saw next left me deeply shaken. His last words were a silent cry for help that no one had heard. Why am I seeing this? I asked, my voice breaking. So that you understand that every choice, every action can profoundly impact the life of another. Even the darkest moments can be overcome if one finds love and hope. That is the lesson you must take to the world, God replied. As I held the book, I felt a deep empathy for that young man's soul. I wish I could have helped him, shown him that there was something beyond the pain. God, as if reading my thoughts, said, use what you learn here to inspire others. Many people are in darkness, but a word, an action of love, can light their path. I looked around the library once again, feeling the grandeur of everything there. Each life told, each page written, was a reflection of the human journey, of pain, but also of overcoming. For the first time in years, I felt like my own story could be a source of hope for someone. I'm ready to start again, I declared, with renewed conviction. The library began to gradually disappear, and the light that surrounded me became softer and softer, like a sunset that precedes the arrival of a new night. The feeling of unconditional love still surrounded me, but now there was a softness, like a hug that slowly released me so I could walk alone. It's time to return, Callista. God's voice rang out one last time. Remember what you saw, what you learned. Every moment is an opportunity for transformation. Take care of the present, love truly, and prepare for the future. I felt a gentle tug, and before I could respond, everything began to go dark again. My body felt like it was being returned to a dense, physical reality. The comforting warmth of the light was replaced by an unpleasant feeling, an oppressive cold and pressure in my chest. With a start, I woke up on the sofa in the living room. My body was limp, and the bitter taste of bile in my mouth indicated that I had vomited up the pills I had taken. My lungs struggled to take in air, and my head throbbed. The sight of my living room, lit only by a dim lamp, was a shocking contrast to the serenity of where I had come from. It took me a few seconds to understand what was happening. I looked at my dirty, shaking hands and then at the clock on the wall. It didn't seem like much time had passed since it all started, but something inside me knew that this experience had changed everything. Suddenly, A soft sound caught my attention. Elliot's breathing. I went to his room, on shaky legs, and found him sleeping soundly, his small body wrapped in a blue blanket. The crying came immediately, but not out of despair as before. I knelt beside his bed, holding his warm little hand. "I almost abandoned you," I whispered, as tears streamed down my face. "I almost made the worst mistake of my life." For a few minutes, I stood there, absorbing the purity of his presence. He was everything to me, and I had almost left him. That thought pierced me like a blade, but at the same time I felt a wave of deep gratitude. I had been given a second chance, not just to live, but to live meaningfully. Standing, I looked around the house, noticing the mess, the bills scattered across the table, the memories of years of struggles and frustrations. It all seemed smaller now. I felt something different in me, a strength I didn't know I had. I took a sheet of paper and a pen and started writing. "Dear Elliot, today I received a new chance. I promise I will never give up on myself, on you, or on life. I will be strong for both of us, and I want you to know that you are the greatest gift God has ever given me." I put the note in his bedside table drawer, where he might find it one day. After that, I went to the bathroom, washed my face and looked in the mirror. The reflection looked the same, but inside me something had changed. I knew it would be difficult, that the difficulties would continue, but something bigger was by my side now. I felt God's love in every breath. It was my chance to start again, and I was determined to take it. The days following my return were a whirlwind of emotions. Initially, the weight of my choices still haunted me. Every time I looked at Elliot, a lump formed in my throat. He ran around the house with his infinite energy, oblivious to what almost happened, but at the same time, his every smile reminded me of why I was still there. That morning, as I was preparing breakfast, something spurred me to action. I called my mother. It was a call I had avoided for months, because the conversations always ended in arguments about how I needed to be stronger. "Callista," her voice sounded surprised when she answered. "Hi, Mum. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for walking away. I was struggling more than you could imagine, but I'm trying to change now." There was silence on the other end of the line before she replied. "Glad to hear that, darling. I always wanted to help, but I didn't know how." We talked for almost an hour. For the first time in years, I didn't feel so alone. It was the beginning of something I couldn't fully explain, a renewed connection to the world around me. Later that day, while Elliot was at school, I sat down with a new notebook. I decided to write about everything that had happened, not just to record my experience, but to try to understand what God wanted me to do with it. The words flowed, describing hell, heaven, and the celestial library. I wrote about the stories I saw and God's warning about November 2024. As I wrote, I realized that my pain and struggles could serve something greater. I could use my experience to help others who were in the same dark place I was. And then, as if something inside me awakened, I decided I would start small. That week, I contacted a local support group for single mothers. During the first meeting, I heard stories that resonated deeply with me. A woman called Angela told how she was struggling to balance 3 jobs while caring for 2 young children. Another, named Lisa, spoke about her divorce and the emotional impact on her children. When it was my turn, I hesitated. For a moment, I felt ashamed. How could I share something so personal and otherworldly? But then, God's words echoed in my mind. "Use what you learn here to inspire others." I almost gave up, I began, my voice shaking. But something happened to me, something that changed my life forever. And today, I'm here because I want to make sure no one else feels as alone as I did. The other women listened to me attentively. Some cried. Others came to hug me after the meeting. For the first time, I felt like my pain had been transformed into something useful, something that could bring hope. That night, while Elliot played with his cars, I sat next to him. "Elliot," I began, holding his little hand, "Mommy is changing. For you, for me, and for all the people who need help. You are the reason I want to be better." He looked at me with his big brown eyes and smiled. "I already knew that, Mom." With each passing day, I felt my connection with life growing stronger. I knew my purpose was slowly unfolding, but God's warning of November 2024 never left my mind. It was a constant thought, a reminder that there was something much bigger at stake. I couldn't just ignore what had been revealed to me. I needed to act, even though I didn't know exactly where to start. That morning, as I was driving Elliot to school, he asked something that caught me by surprise. "Mommy, why do you look so different lately?" I looked at him in the rearview mirror, trying to find the right words, because God showed me that life is precious, Elliot, and now I want to live each day the best way I can. He frowned for a moment and then smiled. I like Mom like that. After dropping him off at school, I drove to a local church that I used to attend before my marriage. It was a small place, with wooden benches and colorful stained glass windows. I knelt down on one of the benches and began to pray. God, you gave me a mission, but I don't know how to fulfill it. Please guide me. As I stood there in silence, I felt an indescribable peace, as if the answer was already inside me, waiting to be discovered. I stood up with renewed determination and decided to start sharing the message I received. That weekend, I organized a meeting at my house with some friends who had been through difficult situations. I also invited some of the women I met in the support group. I didn't tell them exactly what I planned, but I said I wanted to share something important. When everyone arrived, I realized I was nervous. My story was so personal, so intimate, that it seemed difficult to put into words. But as I looked at their faces, I remembered that I was no longer living just for myself. I had a mission. I want to tell you something that happened to me, I began, my voice steady despite my nervousness. I told them about my suicide attempt, my near-death experience, and what I saw in hell and heaven. I told you about the celestial library, the lessons I learned, and God's warning about November 2024. There was silence as I spoke, but it was an attentive silence. Some women cried, others were visibly impacted. When I finished, one of the friends, Angela, held my hand. I don't know if I believe all of this, but I believe in you. Thank you for sharing this. It was at that moment that I realized that my role was not to convince anyone, but to plant seeds. Each person had the power to decide what to do with the message, but I needed to share it. The responsibility was mine. From that day on, I started looking for ways to reach more people. I wrote a short article about my experience and submitted it to a local Christian website. Surprisingly, it was published and received a wave of comments. Some were skeptical, but others shared similar stories, saying how my experience had touched their lives. I also began teaching Elliot about the values God had reminded me of: kindness, empathy, and the importance of living with purpose. "Mommy," he said one night, "I think you're like a light. You make people feel warm inside." Your comment made me cry. I knew there was still a long way to go, but I also knew I was preparing myself for what November 2024 would bring. And more importantly, I was helping others prepare too. The months that followed were a mix of learning, growth, and challenges. Each day felt like a small battle to maintain my focus and purpose, but at the same time, I felt something new: hope. The warning about November 2024 continued to resonate in my mind, not as a paralyzing fear, but as a motivation to act. I started expanding my actions by connecting with people in my community. I spoke in small church groups, shared my experience in support meetings, and even recorded short videos with messages of hope and resilience. It didn't matter if only a few people watched. Every soul touched was a victory. At one of these meetings, I met a man named Nathaniel Reed, a local pastor who also led a community focused on spiritual and emotional help. He came to me after one of my testimonies. "Callista," he began, shaking my hand firmly, "your story is powerful. There is something very special about what you are doing. Have you ever thought about sharing this on a larger scale?" I looked at him hesitantly. "I don't know if I'm ready for something like this. I'm still learning to navigate my own life." Nathaniel smiled. "No one is completely ready, but God does not call the prepared. He prepares those called." His words stuck with me, and over the next few weeks I began to pray about how to expand my reach. Then something surprising happened. One of the videos I posted on social media started gaining attention. It was simple: me, sitting in my kitchen, sharing what I learned about love, overcoming, and the warning about November 2024. Comments started pouring in, from people asking for advice or saying how my words had brought comfort. This response showed me that my message wasn't just mine. It was something that needed to be shared. I decided to organize a community conference to discuss spirituality, resilience, and preparing for change. The event, held at a small local church, attracted more people than I expected. I was nervous going up to the improvised stage, but when I started speaking, I felt like God was with me. "No matter how dark the night," he told the audience, "there will always be a light waiting to guide you. We all go through moments of doubt, pain, and despair, but believe me, God never abandons us. He is with us, even in the moments when we think He is not listening. The words came out with a clarity I didn't know I possessed. I told my story, emphasized the importance of finding purpose in suffering, and prepared people to face the challenges that lay ahead. After the event, several people came to thank me. Some shared their own stories of overcoming, while others said they were feeling lost, but that my words gave them hope. A woman with tears in her eyes hugged me and said, "I was thinking about giving up, but now I know I'm not alone." That night, as I put Elliot to bed, he held my hand and asked, "Are you still scared, Mommy?" I looked at him and smiled. "No, my love. I'm no longer afraid because I know we are being guided." In that moment, I felt a peace that I had never experienced before. I knew challenges would continue to arise, but now I had something greater than fear: faith, purpose, and love. My journey did not end there. She was just getting started. The days approaching November 2024 brought with them growing expectations. I didn't know exactly what would happen, but every action I took felt aligned with something bigger than myself. There was a tangible sense that the world was on the verge of transformation. Over time, I began to notice subtle changes around me. More people came to me for comfort or guidance. My story wasn't just a distant memory. It was a beacon for those who needed to find their way in the darkness. One afternoon, while walking with Elliot through a local park, he asked me something that stuck with me. "Mommy, do you think God talks to me too?" I looked at him, struck by the depth of his question. "Yes, my love. God speaks to all of us, sometimes in a whisper, sometimes in something we feel in our hearts. You just have to be attentive to listen." He stopped, thoughtful, and then smiled. "I think He is happy now. I feel it." That childlike simplicity reminded me of the essence of everything I had learned. God's presence was everywhere, even in the little things, and it was our job to recognize that. As November approached, I began to step up my actions. I organized more meetings, now larger. With the help of Nathaniel and other community leaders, we created a safe space where people could share their concerns, fears, and hopes. Each encounter was a reminder of how connected we all were. On the night of November 1st, I did something I had never done before. I took out a small journal where I had recorded my near-death experience and wrote a prayer. "God, I'm ready. Ready for whatever comes. Ready to be a light in times of darkness. I know there will be challenges, but I trust His plan. Please guide me to where I am needed." The next day, something extraordinary happened. I received an invitation from a larger organization that had discovered my story through the videos and events. They wanted me to speak at a national conference on spirituality and resilience. It was an opportunity I never imagined I would have. "You must accept it," said Nathaniel, when I shared the news with him. "It's no coincidence that this is happening now." Even though she was nervous, she knew he was right. This was the chance to spread the message on an even larger scale. I accepted the invitation and started preparing. The conference took place in mid-November in a large auditorium in Charleston. As I waited for my turn to take the stage, the weight of the moment fell on me. Everything I experienced, hell, the encounter with God, the lessons learned, had led me there. Now was the time to share this with the world. When I finally got on stage, I looked at the audience and took a deep breath. "My name is Callista Winslow," I began, "and a year ago I thought my life was over. But God showed me that even in the darkest times, there is light and purpose. And He showed me that we are entering a period of great transformation." I told my story, from the suicide attempt to the visions and the warning about November 2024. I explained that although the future might seem uncertain, there was hope for everyone who sought the light. The audience listened in absolute silence. At the end, there was an ovation, but, more importantly, I saw faces marked by emotion. I knew my message had touched something deep. That night, I came home to find Elliot already asleep. I sat down next to him and whispered, "Everything is going to be okay, my love. God is with us." My journey does not end here. Each day I seek to live with more purpose and love, helping those around me find the light in their moments of darkness. God gave me a new chance at life, and with it, a call to be a force of hope and change. May what lies ahead, in November 2024 and beyond, be a testament to the power of faith, love, and resilience.